Okay, now what's neat about rational exponents is that they behave the same as all other exponents when we apply the exponent rules that we saw in our first video in 7.2. And so just as a couple of examples, if I wanted to look at, let's say, x to the 1/2 times x to the 2/3, then because we're multiplying with the same base, we just add the powers together. And so we get x to a power, which is the sum of 1/2 and 2/3. Now we're going to have to do a little bit of adding. And of course, to add these together, 1/2 and 2/3, you guys know you need a common denominator. And so our common denominator is 6. We need to multiply by 3 on the top and bottom for the first fraction, and by 2 on the top and bottom of the second fraction. That would give us 3/6 and 4/6. And when you add those up, you get 7/6. So our final answer would have to be x to the 7/6 power. Okay, so this other fraction work on the bottom is just our work in the exponent to try to figure out what the sum is. But again, the idea is that if you're multiplying using the product rule, we're just going to be adding the powers together, even if they're fractions. They behave the same. Another example might be something like, I don't know, let's take a to the 3rd b to the 1/2 over a to the 2/5, and then I'll raise all of that to the 1/3 power. And so there's a couple different ways you could approach this. I always tend to simplify in the parentheses first, so I might try to combine my a to the 3rd and a to the 2/5. Well, of course, that's a subtraction. And so maybe I'll write this out over on the side. If I'm going to subtract those two things, 3 minus 2/5, I need to get a common denominator. Of course, it's 5. So I'm going to need to multiply top and bottom by 5. And that will give me 15/5 minus 2/5, which is 13/5. So my a's in the parentheses become a to the 13/5 times b to the 1/2, and of course then we have our 1/3 power, which according to our product to a power rule, we bring that 1/3 in and multiply it to each of those powers. So it's a to the 13/5 times 1/3 and b to the 1/2 times 1/3. And if I multiply those powers together, I should get a to the 13/15 and b to the 1/6. Okay, so we're just multiplying fractions. That's all we're doing in that one. And a subtraction, of course. Okay, so another answer. Okay, now I'll do one more example. This one I'm going to start with some roots and then use the rational powers to combine the roots. I like this example. I think it's kind of neat. Let's switch the color up here. Let's go with the 5th root of x squared times the square root of x. And what I'm going to do is use then the rational exponents to try to simplify this thing. It doesn't look like they simplify because they're different roots. But if I use the fraction idea to convert this to x to the 2/5 times x to the 1/2, right? This is the power goes on top, the root goes on the bottom. Here the power is 1, the root is 2. Then I need to add those two powers together. So I'll take those off to the side, that would be 2/5 plus 1/2 to get my common denominator, multiplied by 2 on the left, and by 5 on the right to get a common denominator of 10. That would be, what, 4/10 plus 5/10. And 4/10 plus 5/10 makes 9/10. So this combination is really x to the 9/10 when you add those fractions up. And if I want to put it back in radical form, the 10 becomes my root, and the 9 is my power. So I end up with the 10th root of x to the 9th, which is an interesting answer because it doesn't appear that that 9 would really show up from the original radicals, but it does, because we're really just adding fractions together. Okay? So all of our properties hold for rational exponents. You can do the product rule where you add the powers. You can do the quotient rule and subtract the powers. You can do product to a power and multiply them in. All these things still hold. You just have to be able to convert properly, getting the numerator, getting the power to be the numerator and the root to be the denominator. Okay? And yeah, so just remember to keep watching for these videos to show up around the time of your next class period, and try to keep up with them as best you can before attempting the homework. I think they'll be beneficial to you. Thanks.